With the lackluster release of AMD's Ryzen 9000 series of CPUs, we wanted to create an ITX build using these new processors to show what we believe is their main benefit, the lower power draw and lower temperatures. And to do this, we're going to be using a case I've been wanting to build in for quite some time, the Meshroom D. This is a versatile airflow case, less than 15 litres, with good component compatibility and many ways to configure your build. This is the first time I've used an all-mesh case, and I have to be honest, I was really concerned that it would feel flimsy. But I've been incredibly surprised just how damn solid this case feels, giving me the confidence that I could throw this in a backpack for a LAN party. Now the panels are all clipped in place and easily removable when you want to start your build or upgrade in the future. We get two USB-A's and a USB-C ports on the front and a rear power button. Plus, this case can take large 3.4 slot GPUs at up to 325mm long. It can also take large CPU coolers up to 142mm or a 280mm radiator. So with this in mind, let's start building. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be using a Ryzen 5 9600X CPU. This is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU that boosts to 5.4 GHz. It runs cooler than the 7600X it's replacing with slightly better performance. Now don't get me wrong, if you're prepared to tweak your 7600X, you could get similar temps for less money. But I do think the 7000 range will start drying up, so if you do want them, start buying them now. These new CPUs are compatible with B650 or X670 motherboards with just a simple BIOS update. Now this is one of the reasons I'm absolutely loving AMD at the moment. Not only are the CPUs efficient, so great for ITX builds, but they keep the platform around much longer than Intel, meaning future upgrades are going to be cheaper. Now we decided to use our favourite ROG B650E ITX motherboard. The B650E is a fantastic ITX board and it's been rock solid stable for us over the year and allowed good memory compatibility, whilst also providing good ports, audio and two M.2 slots. Now talking of M.2s, for this build we'll be using our trusty Western Digital SN850X 2TB Gen 4 drive. And being a traditional build, we can easily have access to that rear M.2 slot later just by popping the right panel. The case can also support a multitude of SATA drives as well if needed. So with the CPU at home in our motherboard, it's time to install the cooler. And for this build, we've chosen the Thermalright Silversol 135. Now anyone might think that I'm actually sponsored by Thermalright at this point, as we've used a few of their coolers in our builds. But it's just because they offer an incredible mix of performance and value. As an example, the Silversol costs less than half the price of a similar spec Noctua cooler, which used to be my go-to range of heatsinks. And these coolers are easy to install. Just remove the AMD retention brackets and replace with a Thermalright retention frame. This is just a few spacers and the retention bars are screwed into the original AMD backplate. We just apply a blob of thermal paste and screw down our heatsink. Lastly, we clip on the fan and plug it into the motherboard. And for the last part of the motherboard build, we're going to be using our Kingston Fury 32GB 6000 RAM kit. This is an RGB RAM kit, and we're hoping it's going to look great through the mesh side panel of this case, giving it a lovely aesthetic. So with the motherboard built up, it's time to prepare the case. Now removing all these panels is an absolute breeze, and the first thing I want to do is install a rear 92mm fan to bring fresh air into that CPU cooler. We also wanted to add a lovely 140mm Corsair RGB fan to exhaust the hot air out of the case and also provide a nice RGB front through this mesh. With that out of the way, let's install the motherboard. Now I did need to unscrew the power connector at the back to make it easier to seat the motherboard into place. We then screwed down the 4 screws to hold the motherboard in, then screwed back the power connector. I then just attached the fan to the motherboard header and the power button connectors. We're now ready to install the PSU. Now this case can take an SFX, SFXL or an ATX PSUs in multiple orientations. But to maximise the airflow and cable mess, we've decided not to use an ATX PSU in this build, and we've chosen to go with the Corsair SF850L. This will provide more than enough power for our build and give us plenty of headroom should we want to use more power-hungry components in the future. Whenever I use these SFX PSUs, I'm always absolutely marvelled by just how compact they are. They'll easily fit in a big case like this and give us plenty of airflow around it. Now we do need to remove the PSU mounting plate from the case with just 4 screws. We then screw that plate to the PSU with the PSU screws. Now I always install the cables I'm going to use on my build only to maximise the airflow in the case and minimise clutter. So in this case, I'm just installing the 24-pin and 8-pin motherboard power connectors, plus the GPU PCIe power connectors. Installing these connectors whilst outside of the case is definitely the easiest approach. Then we just seat the PSU bracket back into the case and apply the 4 screws. We then plug in our 8-pin motherboard power, followed by our 24-pin motherboard power. This didn't even need much cable tying because it sits exactly where we need it. Lastly, we need to put the graphics card cable just out the way to the side, ready for when we install our graphics card in a second. Now this case can accommodate some monster graphics cards, but for this build we wanted to go all AMD, especially with some of the offers that we've seen at the moment, such as this Sapphire Pulse 7800 XT. This graphics card comes in cheaper than the RTX 4070, with more VRAM and performs way better in anything but heavy ray trace games. Plus at the moment they're giving away 4 games with this actual card, including Space Marine 2, which I really wanted to get hold of. That does make it incredible value for money if you need a graphics card right now. So let's plug in the 7800 XT into this case. We then screw it down with the 2 screws and plug in our 2 8-pin power connectors. Lastly, we just need to clip back on the side panels and we're done, we're ready to fire it up. So here it is on our gaming desk. I'm absolutely loving the Corsair RGB fans. They look great through this mesh. Like the RTX 4070 build we did recently, this 7800 XT is a great 1440p card. Now I'm using my Alienware 34-inch OLED ultrawide, so I do need plenty of graphics muscle. So far, this 7800 XT has just cut through all the games I play on it. Other than setting the RAM to the Expo and adjusting the fan speeds in BIOS to make this case nice and quiet, I have not undervolted the CPU or the GPU for the testing of this video to show you what the worst case temps would be like. Obviously, if you run the fans higher or undervolt, you'll get even better temperature. But even so, we're getting great temps in this case, and it's running in its long-term gaming sessions at only 38 decibels. And the 9600X sits at 5.4 GHz at about 78 watts, which is a good 10 plus watts lower than the previous 7600X that we use, but it also has 200 MHz more speed as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with the current pricing, you are still better off probably buying that's either the 7600X or 7600 and saving a few quid, but I do think they will slowly be phased out, and therefore I think the prices will drop on these 9000, and when they do, these will be fantastic buys. Now overall, I'm absolutely incredibly pleased with not only this case, but this whole Airflow build. It's just running everything that I'm actually throwing at it, and incredibly quietly as well. And under 15 litres, it is still compact. So there we go. As always, I'd love to know what you guys think. What do you think of this Meshroom D case? I think it is a great buy, but I'd love to know what you guys think. And as always, if you've got any comments or questions, pop it down below. I will get back to you. And lastly, thanks for watching.